On the planning board meeting, panel meeting. We'll start out with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If there's an emergency, go out that exit right there, and hang left and get out of the building. One thing I want to mention, it's National Fire Prevention Week. Make sure you check your batteries and your smoke detectors, change your batteries, and one of the promotions for this year on the NFPA standards is Icon batteries. Check your Icon batteries, don't overcharge them, and use the right chargers. There's been a big problem on Icon batteries catching on fire, especially on bikes and scooters, so keep that in mind, everybody. Other than that, let's roll right into the meeting, on the regular meeting. Other matters is our R&R concrete amendment site plan resolution. That's first on the agenda here, yes?
Yes.
We'll start out with that.
Ken would say I move that we accept the agenda.
Okay, need a second on that?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So carries then.
Mr. Chair, this was, if I may, on our...
Go ahead.
This was inadvertently left off the last agenda. They have satisfied generally all our concerns. I think you made a determination that we did not need to hold a public hearing as it was a minor application. So we were authorized, Paul and myself were authorized to craft a resolution. Paul actually crafted it, so I won't take any credit at all.
I'll take all the blame.
So you have in front of you a very simple application for a site plan amendment. You remember they're adding a small storage container
Correct.
on one end of the building to kind of help them manage their concrete additives. And but for the installation of appropriate notice safety hazard placards, it was otherwise complete. So we would recommend that you consider the resolution, and I'll leave it to Paul to go through the resolution.
Sure.
Go ahead.
You sorry, Mark? So now therefore be it resolved in accordance with the zoning law, the planning board finds that the proposed amendment is consistent with the terms of the special use permit approval and hereby conditionally approves the amended site plan for the project prepared by Rania Engineering and dated July 28, 2025, last revised August 25th, 2025. Subject to the following conditions, the applicant shall satisfy any outstanding comments from the planning board's engineer, and the applicant shall pay any outstanding invoices owed to the town. Be it further resolved that the planning board hereby authorizes the chairperson to stamp and sign the amended site plan on the applicant's compliance with the above conditions. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be filed in the office of the town clerk, and it shall be mailed to the applicant within all within a 5-day period. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall take effect immediately.
Need a motion?
I move that we agree to the resolution granting amended site plan approval.
Second? Second. You want to read it off?
The foregoing resolution is voted upon with all members of the planning board voting as follows. Robert Boyle Jr., chairperson.
Yes.
Nina Peak, deputy chairperson.
Yes.
Lizette Bullock, absent. James Walsh.
Yes.
Walter Dietrich.
Yes.
Kenneth Polsky is absent. Jamie Vitiello.
Yes.
Okay, so carries.
So it shall be.
We need to accept the minutes from 9/25/25 as amended.
I move to accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
Discussion, can we just,
Go ahead.
there was 2 questions in here. One was about whether or not we got the letter from the Dutchess County Department of Health for the septic.
I have a letter, I don't know if it's in the town files, I have a letter that basically says it's technically approvable. They have not issued approval, they can't issue an approval until you folks do, but there was a letter that said it's technically approvable. I'll make sure Judy gets a copy of that.
Okay.
And then the other item, Madam was the fact that the planning board has the ability on any lot that existed prior to 2007, which was the adoption date of your current zoning code. You have the ability to modify the setbacks based on compliance with certain conditions. And that was stated in my memo, and So we'll amend the language related to that.
Yeah, it said structure, not lot.
Yeah,
It should be the lot.
yeah. Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? That all being said, there was a motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So carries then. First on the agenda is Smith, 108 Wesley Ridge.
Good evening, members of the Planning Board. Rebecca Volk with the Law Office of Rebecca Volk. My client Liza Van Smith is here in the audience as well. This matter has been before you a number of times in the past. This is a lot in the Westerly Ridge subdivision. It is Lot 9 in that subdivision. And we first received approval from this board back in 2019 for a site plan for the construction of a single-family home. And as part of that approval, we did a full visual assessment at that time, given that this is in your scenic protection overlay. And one of the concerns was we sought and successfully obtained a waiver from the requirement in your code regarding construction being so many feet below the crest line. So this approval, unfortunately, the clients have struggled at times over the years to have potential buyers. We've indicated in our cover letter some of the recent reasons why that's occurred. They are pleased to report that they do have 2 potential buyers, and the current site plan approval expires on October 24th. And so we are here seeking a reapproval. This board has done this exercise with this project twice before, where you have reapproved on the same record. We have indicated in our cover letter that there are no changes to the site, to our application, to any of the conditions. Everything on the property remains as it was when you issued your approval in 2019. In his comments, your engineer has requested a field visit to confirm that on the town's behalf, which we of course welcome. We would just try to coordinate as there is a gate on the property. As you are aware, the procedures that this board used in our second reapproval were challenged by legal action. I'm pleased to report those were successfully defended in that legal action, and that was not appealed to the second department, and therefore that is a binding law at this time. So I have submitted for you the plans from Saratoga, which you approved in 2019. And at this time, I'm sure you're going to want to hear from your consultants, but we're available for any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. John?
Well, as Ms. Volk stated, this is not new to the board, although there are new board members since this has been done. As a matter of fact, the last approval was, Nina was the new member at that point, relatively speaking, with respect to this application. It is, as Ms. Volk indicated, it is a ridgeline issue. There was a complete analysis done. Fortuitously, Mr. James is here. He participated, believe it or not, in that analysis. And many of his recommendations were incorporated into the final determination of findings by this planning board, one of which resulted in granting of the waiver. The other basically set forth some parameters and conditions for construction of the house, its size, its color, its location, and some other issues. The applicants did spend a bunch of time on the previous applications working with the fire district to clear up and repair some glitches on the site. And as Ms. Falk finally indicated, it was subject to legal challenge, which was successfully defended, as she indicated. But a couple of the tenets of that successful defense were comments made on the record by counsel and myself, and actions by the planning board, which basically substantiated the fact that there were no changes to the project site. At that point in time, I had made a visit to that site and was able to say that. I have not had an opportunity to do it, and I would seek your authorization to pay a visit to the site, make sure that conditions are as they say they are, and even perhaps to revisit a couple of the photograph locations that were taken during the initial study, and take some simple photographs, because I think what you'll see is that I think there was a lot that was developed adjacent to it that kind of rules the overlook. But for the most part, this lot, it remains, to the best of my knowledge, unchanged, and except for the fact that vegetation is now, what, 2019 to 2025, almost 6 years further down the road. So The simple thing for tonight is, absent any questions, I'd like your authorization to make a site visit, and I would welcome anybody from the planning board if you care to join me. And we can coordinate that at a time that the applicant can open the gates.
John, I apologize if I missed this and it's available to me and I didn't see it. Are those visuals available for us to look at?
They exist in the town record in hard copy. I don't know if they're in digital format. I think some of the plans are in digital format, but I don't think the full evaluation by Saratoga is, although I think I may be able to produce it from my files if you need it. I can get.
I was just
I
feel
will-
like since Nina was the only one maybe on
I
here.
was there.
Oh, you were,
Mhm.
okay.
I was
And
on.
James was there.
I think Chairman Boyles is probably getting tired of seeing me.
I'd love to see it.
I'll
I mean,
get you.
I think,
Well-
given that we are revisiting and reapproving or potentially reapproving a site plan, I think it behooves you to resubmit the whole package for the purposes of the file.
Okay, so I think everything is in existence. I will verify if I have it electronically to communicate, but let me know if you want any additional. I might have to coordinate with Saratoga about an electronic. I'm not sure if I
Yeah,
have that, but,
I think I have one, but I will
Okay.
double check. But the only thing that's not in the package is the visual assessment itself. The site plans, as they were approved, are in what you were given to review. So, but I will get you the visuals as quickly as I can. If I gotta digitize them, I'll do that.
and the visuals are submitted on very large to give an appropriate viewpoint, so.
If I remember correctly, one of the major concerns that I've heard from residents in the area is that it's close to the ridge. And that has been an ongoing concern.
So the unique thing about this lot was there had been significant clearing at the top prior to the adoption of your scenic protection overlay law. So the goal is there is very minimal additional. There is, when you look at the site plan, a very clear square as to where we have to develop within and the trees that must remain.
And the other thing I've got to confess here is that the way this lot is configured, the lot rises steeply from the road, and then it kind of flattens off and tails off to the rear being the interior portion of the lot. And your code says 40 foot below the ridge line, and I think the point Mr. James made is, in order to get 40 foot below the ridge line, you'd have to clear more,
Yes.
and you'd probably end up making the hill look worse, rather than working with the environment that was created at the top.
Okay.
And so what they did, just to bring it full circle, what was determined is that there was an area, I think it was 100 by 100 or 100 by 150 feet, that had to be marked by permanent monuments, that's the only place the house could go. And you couldn't move it, and then everything else was behind the house. So it wasn't that the fact that you wouldn't see it, but that the vegetation that was there would work with the color and layout of the house to make it less prominent.
And-
So that's why we need to take a look and see if anything's
If I
changed.
remember correctly, it was about windows.
There's limitations
There's
on your windows.
Quite a few conditions to the resolution. I just know, I'm looking at the note, it's 100 by 150 feet is the building envelope. And you may also recall, when I was here in March for the extension, this board actually imposed an additional condition to make clear that any lighting had to be of a residential nature, which we had no objection to. I think it's actually in the bylaws of the subdivision. So there was never any intent to have very high. The lights that are there now are about 6 feet, and they are residential lights.
So as we stand right now, we need a motion to let, authorize John to go do a site.
I'll make that motion to authorize John Andrews to conduct a site visit.
Need a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Rob?
Quick,
Can I just,
Go ahead.
I think the idea of the board becoming familiar with the entire application, particularly the visuals,
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah.
We also should make sure that there's back and forth correspondence that occurred between George James and Saratoga Associates, so you can see sort of the progression of how he came to having some comfort with what they were showing and how that was reflected in terms of his recommendations. So I think that's all very important. And I would encourage, if the board has a mind and the time, to join John and.
I'll meet up
do a
with
site
you.
visit.
I'll go.
Okay,
Yeah.
what I'll do is I'll give Judy a couple dates, and we'll
Yeah.
I'll circulate them by email in the morning once I understand, and I'll include you, Rebecca, and you can deal with Ms. Vance.
Right.
Much appreciated.
Because, ultimately, this is not a reapproval. That we have no provision for that in the zoning law. This is a new approval, it's a new application, and for most of the members, I would say a majority of the members, it's first time you'll have seen
Yeah.
it, so.
So I
have
would,
a
I would,
question, sorry.
Go ahead.
So the way I understand it from reading it today is that the owner of the property wants to sell the property, and these restrictions, for lack of better words, would be placed on whoever buys,
correct,
correct?
correct. Yes, it runs with the property, it's not unique to the property owner. There's just a couple housekeeping and one point I would like to make. When we last did a reapproval, the item of circulating the ag data statement came up, and I would just ask for authority to circulate that. If not, we also referred to DC Planning the last time, even though they've had this record before.
And we will do that.
Yeah, to keep the record.
And the board will have to determine at some point whether or not it wants to hold a public hearing on this.
Yeah, I would just note in the past that the board has exercised the right to waive the public hearing. And I would note that under New York State law, if there is no change in conditions, the board needs to explain why it's deviating. So we actually have a strong position that we haven't changed a single thing. So I would ask the board to consider abiding by the same procedure that it has abided by in the last 3 approvals.
Right.
And the other thing I will say.
Keeping in mind the change in circumstances and the fact that there has been an
New
additional
board
public
members.
interest in the application that actually led to a lawsuit challenging a planning board decision.
And I'm just wondering, since we're talking about 6 years now, it might behoove you to just check with the fire company again, get some kind of documentation that, or have something in file that, it might help with the sale as well.
Well, in point of fact, we actually met out there with the fire truck, and we drove the response vehicle up their driveway and identified the improvements to be made. They made those improvements, and then we again met out there and drove up with a fire truck. So, and then you'll find in the record some of the newer requirements, as the chairman has said. This is one of the first ones that they either have to have a swimming pool with an automatic connection, or they have to supply us with I think it's a 5,000-gallon storage tank for water at the top of the hill, because it is so high. And both of which are now pretty much standard recommendations of the fire district. But this was one of the first that we posed that, and they agreed to it. So,
Well, I'm just saying, it might behoove them to have
understood.
that documentation in place, because we're looking at something that's 6 years old, right?
But keep in mind, during that, it was after your approval that they did many of the improvements for the fire district. I think the site plan was signed maybe about 6 months after the approval, because they needed to do those improvements. So we're not looking at a full 6 years, it's a little bit of a shorter time frame
Okay.
that was all. Yeah.
I'm just.
It was a little easier, you had a gentleman who was part of the fire company, so the recommendations came pretty quickly, but I don't see him here tonight. Matt, yes, Matt, that's correct.
so, but we will again revisit it with the fire district, just to be sure.
I just think it's a good
No,
idea.
I don't disagree. Because as to Paul's point, this is a de novo, basically a new approval, even though you have a substantial record. So it's your first vote on it. So you need to be satisfied that all the i's have been dotted and t's have been crossed.
So there's a couple of waivers that are built into what they've requested, and, it's just the sort of thing you want to know in your due diligence.
Would it be helpful to this record is actually online in the court proceeding? I could download that entire record, which is going to be every single document that is in the town's files, but I would be able to give that to you electronically.
Including the visual, wasn't there?
Yeah, because it's part of the record that went before the court. So it's actually accessible online right now.
Well, I'll look first thing in the morning. I have, I
Yeah.
think, a shorter version of what we're submitting.
I'm just saying, we're not, everything's there and available for review. There's nothing that's being held back.
Okay.
Okay, there we are.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Run.
You assume.
So would we be an agenda item on the 22nd?
I'm going to try to get my site visit in the next 7 days if I can do that, so
It's up to the board.
that would be.
I don't see a problem with it. As long as we get the site, as long as we go see the site, it'll be good,
And as long as the board has sufficient time to review the materials.
Yeah. which we should.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Next is Northern Red Oak LLC, Mini Trail Project.
Hi, everybody. Lauren Zane from Northern Red Oak, here representing the Amenia Trails Project. Just a recap, we're a charitable organization with an interest in the outdoors, and we're interested in building a free, open to the public mountain biking hiking trails on private land. So it would be accessible at 426 Old Route 22, 10 to 12 miles of trails, sunrise to sunset. They'll be professionally built with conservation in mind. And, we're committed to being good neighbors and good community members. So we've got the responses at our last meeting. We responded to those. We got the next set of responses. So we've had a lot of progress since the last time that we talked. And I think most of the items are either in process or agreed to. One question we got the last time was around NYSEG. We did get our preliminary approval from NYSEG, and they are going to follow up with us at the end of this week with next steps for us. That's for the power lines on the property. We noted that you have asked for additional mapping to show the east side of the property. That is something that we can do. Open to any other questions or comments.
I have a question, and Paul, you can stop me if it's not an okay question, but if you're willing to answer it. Some local folks in town have approached me and said, hey, that you guys have made some offers to buy adjacent land, and the conspiratorial theory that has emerged is that you're making this project to preserve it so that there can be development around this. If you're willing to answer that, is there any validity to that?
No,
Okay,
absolutely not.
so we can put these.
No. Yeah, we are a
Theories
charitable
to bed.
organization. Our core work is grant making around, for example, helping kids learn how to read. And this happens to be an additional project because we have an interest in the outdoors.
Okay.
And there is zero interest in anything other than a recreational site.
Fantastic.
I'll also add to that, Dutchess Land Conservancy is involved with this property and they have an easement on it. And a lot of the land surrounding this property also has Dutchess Land Conservancy conservation easements on them as well.
Great, thank
So,
you.
It's a lot of the property is conserved in this area.
Perfect, thank you.
Do we have a copy of the NYSEG letter? Did you guys send that to us?
We don't have a formal letter yet. It's just
Okay.
an email, but we can ask our contact there for a letter.
I think that, or even
Or
if
or
it's just
even
an
the
email,
email,
it's
because there
fine.
wasn't
Yeah,
one
yeah.
Okay.
in the file. It said you had talked to them, but
Yes,
they were still pondering the issue.
great. Yeah, we will send that to you.
John?
Okay, I do have a memo. As the applicant indicated, they've made substantial progress. Basically, a couple highlights since the last time. I did speak at length with their engineer, who has been working with Dutchess County. I think they've ironed out the issues with the Dutchess County Department of Public Works regarding access to the roadway. We have an email indicating basically conceptual approval. They can't move ahead and get a permit until they get approvals, but DPW has basically said, when you're ready for a permit, there are no conditions that we've observed that would prevent you from getting it. So that's put to rest. There was an issue of New York State DEC jurisdictional wetlands. They got a couple letters. The only jurisdictional wetlands were identified on one of the Levin properties, which is one of the properties in what I'll call the back, on the back side, on the Armenian Union side. And They subsequently also got an update this afternoon at about 4 something, which basically said, we took another look at your request. You don't seem to be doing anything within our areas of interest, so in our opinion, you don't need a DEC permit. So that kind of closes that issue. Quite honestly, I'm going to piggyback on that because it's appropriate to do so. The issue of endangered species kind of fell through the cracks, and one of the board members was kind of polite enough to point it out to me. We still need a resolution of that. We still need some sign-offs from DEC on endangered species, whether it be rattlesnake or bog turtle. But that needs to be closed up, and before any final determination of significance would be able to be made by the town board, we would need that documentation. So if I may, I just want to get that in the record, because it's not in my memo, and I apologize.
Great. And we did contract with someone who is going out on the property, hopefully this week,
Okay.
to look at that and document what's there.
Okay, so we will need that ultimately in the
Yeah.
record. Actually, the town board needs it
Yeah.
in their determination. The NYSEG issue they mentioned, we had a long talk last time, Mr. Chairman, about emergency access from
Yes.
Union Road. They submitted documentation which indicates the easement. They submitted documentation that kind of gives you the route. But anytime you put that kind of information in an inset on a drawing, you tend to lose context. And I think that needs to be expanded so that we can see exactly where that point of connection with Union Road is, so there's no question. And that does have a stream crossing involved. I think it's existing, but they need to be able to demonstrate that they don't need to do any work on that end. Let's see, Dutchess County we talked about. They talked about demolition. They tend to demolish this before they start trail construction, but all that will come after they get their special permits and things are in place. The other issue, the fire district did submit a lengthy letter of support suggesting that if you decide to approve it, there's some conditions they want in place. The conditions did not seem unreasonable. Somebody really did their homework. And I think from the way I read everything, the trail sponsors are committing to providing those necessary elements. So that kind of takes that almost off the table. So remembering what your role in this is, recommendation and referral back to the town board. It's my conclusion, based on the information that's been submitted, absent the endangered species, that the application generally appears to provide sufficient information to base a determination of significance. The application further contains sufficient information on which to conduct a public hearing. Most of the major issues have been somewhat resolved. They did a better job of mapping, and once they map all the way over to Union, it should be satisfactory. We would recommend that the planning board is now in a position to refer this application back to the town board for their review and action. Remember, they're the approving agency.
Yes.
They have to do all the work. So, we would recommend that your referral include the following recommendations: that you kind of deem the application complete, that you recommend they classify the action as a major project and refer it to both Dutchess County and the Town of Amenia Zoning Board of Appeals. They're not seeking any variances, but according to your code, any major project requiring site plan approval must be referred to the ZBA once you deem it complete for their review and comment. Same applies to the town board. So it's a referral, not a requirement for any variances. We would further recommend that the town board classify the action as an unlisted action under seeker, subject to uncoordinated review. The reason for uncoordinated is they're the primary authorizing body. Nobody else, everybody else issues permits or subservient permits, so to speak. But absent the action of the town board, nothing moves forward. Basically, I think in my mind, fill in a few gaps. This would be almost ready for a negative declaration and almost ready for consideration of a resolution of special use permit and site plan approval with conditions by the town board. But I think the clear position tonight from myself is that unless you have major remaining items, it's time for this to go back to the board and let them do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, and I absolutely concur with that to the resolution to assist the town board in its process. Our suggestion, I have a resolution that would basically capture the items John mentioned, but then also would provide the town board with a draft FEAF Part 2, because it's not something they're used to going through. With the exception of the plants and animals, I think we can probably, say that there won't be any significant adverse impacts. And then provide.
Question. Has there been any kind of study to see if there's any plant or fauna life that might be endangered?
There has not been, but that's really the question why they have DEC coming out to see whether or not something like that is needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, Lauren, you just said that you're having somebody come out and study whether there is habitat for rattlesnakes, for bog turtles, and whether the proposed project would have any impact on the species that were identified.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
And if there are issues, if DEC raises issues, then before they'll get a sign off from DEC, they're gonna have to do more homework, probably.
Okay, I'm just
Okay.
raising
No, it's
that
fair.
question because,
And we're leaving that one open, because, everything else I think is covered based on John's review, but that question remains to be resolved and would need to be resolved before the town board would want to act.
I figured I'd raise it.
No, it's good. And so accompanying the FEAF Part 2, if the board is willing, authorize John and I to provide a template resolution, negative declaration for the town board to consider if it gets to that point. And then similarly, a template special use permit and site plan approval resolution, so that they basically have the templates that you guys are usually working from and used to. They don't have to create them from whole cloth themselves.
Well, is this the resolution we're looking at tonight?
Yes.
Okay, I would just like to add something in the resolution. It says 426 Old Route. I think you want to put 22 in there. Old Route 22.
Oh, yes, that would probably be
County Route
appropriate.
81.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Or is it 81?
Good catch.
County Route 81,
County Route 81?
that's what it is.
Okay.
It says Old Route and then
It's Old Route
intermediate.
22, County Route 81.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you ever determine anything on the handicap accessibility?
We have in our parking lot drawings a handicap spot. The trails themselves are not going to be handicapped accessibility, but there will be a handicap spot in the parking lot and a place for someone who, should they be handicapped, can hang out while other folks in their party are on the trails.
I don't even know.
For the resolution, is it possible for you to just either, I don't know if you're gonna, are we voting on this tonight, or is this something that was just kind of taking a look at? And thinking about it?
It's up to you all, but I have added some language to account for the DEC question, if that's what you
But
probably.
the most we're doing is referring it to the ZBA anyway, right?
Yeah.
Where is
Back
that
to the
then?
town.
No, you go back to the town board, sir.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful maybe if the resolution that we provide to the town board, if you're gonna do a template, just list the other approvals that the applicant needs to get. Like, so, we're making this recommendation that no additional work needs to be done, or we're comfortable with the analyses that have been done, but we defer approval, or condition our approval, for lack of a better word, on them securing permits from the highway department, or Dutchess County DPW, the JD letter, you know, if you need a
I can add that to the.
determination
Yeah.
from.
That would be
Yeah.
fine.
From the Corps, I
Yeah.
don't know if you need.
I think
A
just-
nationwide permit.
Yep.
Just for the board's edification, I think our goal in making this recommendation was to kind of provide the town board with focus.
Right.
Because they've never, to my knowledge, for as long as I've been here, the town board's never undertaken this. You folks do this on a regular and routine basis. So sometimes when you look at the wide landscape, you kind of get inundated. And our goal was to try to focus so that they stayed on the key issues so that they could move this ahead in a rather reasonable fashion.
And frankly, I mean, we can call that out specifically, but I had, in drafting a template resolution, I had thought that would be one of the kind of automatic conditions
Okay,
obtaining
that's fair.
other agency approvals.
Yeah.
So I definitely
And
make sure.
given that this is the town board's first, you know,
Yeah,
go around here, I think it would be helpful for us to itemize what those are.
so it should include the standard conditions
Yeah.
of approval that we would ordinarily
Yeah.
impose. Okay.
So we can approve this resolution tonight, and you're gonna send a template to the town for all
Yeah,
the other
and-
conditions.
yep,
That's fine.
Yep,
I'll start reading it.
sure. And I'll try and add some language right in there at the end on that last paragraph, Nina, so you hopefully we'll cover that. Now therefore be it resolved that based upon this review, the planning board makes the following recommendations for the town board's consideration. Town board may determine the application to be complete for purposes of its zoning law review of the project once the applicant has provided the additional information recommended by the planning board's engineer as reflected in his October 6, 2025 memorandum attached here to as Exhibit A, along with any technical follow-up information determined to be necessary by the planning board's engineer. And 2, based upon a complete application, town board may determine that the project is an unlisted action for seeker review purposes. There is an open seeker question regarding the potential impacts of the project on protected species, which requires further consultation with DEC. The planning board's review, with that exception, the planning board's review does not indicate that the project will result in any potential significant adverse impacts to the environment. Based upon the draft FEAF Part 2 attached here to as Exhibit B. Accordingly, the planning board recommends that the town board may want to consider adopting a seeker negative declaration for the project and directs the planning board attorney to provide the town board with a template for a draft seeker negative declaration resolution for its consideration, which would be attached to this resolution as Exhibit C. 3, upon determining the application to be complete, the town board may classify the application as a major project under the zoning law and schedule a public hearing, providing notice of the hearing is required by Article 9 of the zoning law. B, refer the application to the Dutchess County Planning Department for advisory comments pursuant to GML 239M. No decision on the project may be made until DCPD comments are received or until a period of 30 days has lapsed, whichever occurs first. And C, refer the application to the ZBA for advisory comments pursuant to the zoning law. The zoning law allows the ZBA up to 45 days to provide comments. And after receipt of comments from DCPD and the ZBA and the close of the public hearing, the town board may A, make a secret determination with respect to the project. If the town board determines that no significant adverse impacts will occur from the project, the town board may consider adopting the draft secret negative declaration attached to this resolution as Exhibit C. If the town board adopts a secret negative declaration resolution for the project, it may consider adoption of an approval resolution for the project and hereby directs the planning board to prepare a template for a draft special use permit and site plan review approval resolution, including standard conditions. which shall be attached to this, is attached to this resolution as Exhibit C. And be it further resolved that this resolution shall take effect immediately.
Need a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Need a
Second.
Ready? Judy, you want to do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. The foregoing resolution was voted upon with all members of the planning board voting as follows. Robert Boyle Jr., chairperson.
Yes.
Nina Peak, deputy chairperson.
Yes.
Lizette Bullock, absent. James Walsh,
Yes.
Walter Deacon.
Yes.
Kenneth Topolsky, absent. Jamie Atiello.
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you. And for next steps, do we follow up with the town board or with you?
With the board's authorization, what I would do is put together the entire resolution and package with its attachments. Want to share it around to the planning board once,
Okay.
so that they can, say that's good to go.
Thank you.
And then I'll be in touch with Ian,
Great.
the town attorney, and get that to the town board. Does that sound right, Virginia?
And just for the record, that won't be tomorrow.
Right, right.
It'll probably be, we need some time to prepare that, so,
Yeah.
so I would recommend that you not call Mr. Lindars tomorrow morning and say,
Yeah.
what's our next steps?
Yeah.
He'll get this sometime in the next week or so, and you'll be off to the races,
We'll
folks.
make sure Anthony is here, appropriate contact.
Yeah, that would be great. Yep.
Yeah, I'll work with,
So
Is that all right?
do we need a motion?
to authorize
Yes.
me.
I'd like to authorize our attorney to amend the
To
resolution
put-
and
to-
put it all together in one big package.
That's right, and then,
Need a
make
second?
sure it's properly handed off to the town board and town attorney.
Need a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So carries in.
Great, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks.
You gotta go over this.
Ciao for now.
Yeah. See you soon. See you for the barbecue. Um,
No,
I guess I wait till Walter gets back.
but I just didn't.
We need a chorus.
Yeah, he was Walter gets back.
Are we, are we waiting for Mr.
I'll
Duchek?
wait for Walter to get back.
Yeah.
So, good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Diana Kolev from the firm of Del Bello, Donnell & Weingarten Wise and Whitaker. Also here tonight is Peter Farrow from AKRF, our project planner, and Peter Sander from Renia Engineering. So, as you know, at your last meeting, you resolved to accept and circulate the scoping document for the environmental impact statement for this project. And that scoping document was circulated, we understand, on October 1st to interested and involved agencies. Since that time, we also received from Mr. Van Cott, your attorney, a memo regarding his discussion with Mr. Janes regarding additional alternatives to be considered for the scope. There are alternatives listed in the scoping document already, and so I understand that there's going to be some discussion tonight. We're here to listen, answer any questions that you might have, and we look forward to the October 22nd public session for scoping.
Good.
Okay, well, the memo that Paul wrote has this idea of the alternatives that would investigate means to avoid or reduce the visual impacts of the project. And so there are alternatives, as Diana said, in the scope already. And I think the idea of adding some, and Paul, please jump in, because you are the author of this, is that we wanted to have something that instead of maximizing the kind of development here, one that really looked at that sentence, right? Investigate means to avoid or reduce the visual impacts of the projects in an alternative. The idea is so that you're given, when you look at these things, you actually are given more meaningful choices, or more meaningful information in the alternatives on what can happen on this site. And so we had come up with a couple that looked at essentially a design that clustered the subdivision so that you are working with the topography of the land and natural features, and then another resort development overlay alternative that looks at this as kind of like creating another hamlet-sized area in the town. And the idea behind that is that, this view from De La Verne Hill is I'd like to say this, it's a developed view, right? It is a view that has been shaped by the hands of men and women for 100 years, except for the highlands, right? Which they're not touching, right? And so it is a developed view. And so what it is in the future is, there's a wide range of elements. And so that's where this came from. I don't think that there's, any particular right answers here. These are the ideas that we came up with. As members of the board, you may think that others are more appropriate or less appropriate. And I think that this is up for discussion.
Yeah.
Paul?
And thanks, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus there, my memo. But yeah, we did talk about it, and it really comes back to just looking at the draft scope. The alternatives that they presented really show how bad it could be.
Yes.
Okay, they would show that, you could have a maximum build out of a conventional subdivision here, or a maximum build out of a conservation subdivision, or a maximum RDO build out. And it would be so much worse than what we're doing. But one of the things for a seeker alternatives analysis in an environmental impact statement is to come up with a meaningful alternative that would hopefully achieve the applicant's objectives, in terms of the density that they're looking at, but would perhaps better minimize or avoid the visual impacts that are of the greatest concern to the community. So that's what we're looking for and suggesting to the board that it ought to require as part of the scope. There may be other ways of doing it than we had talked about in terms of our suggestions. There are, just talking with George, there's potential for looking at maybe certain areas of the overall project site are less visible than others. Or if you work the development around the edges of the site, use the tree lines and that sort of things, then the topography, you might be able to do a better job of avoiding some of the visual impacts, while at the same time meeting the density goals the applicant seeks in order to make it a viable project. So that was our suggestion. We wanted to have it presented as a conversation for the board. I don't know if the applicant has any immediate thoughts or feedback on it. Our suggestion basically was, well, let's continue through finalization of the scope, but at some point in time, have some agreement on at least one or two alternatives that would actually be calculated to have less of a visual impact than what is presented as the preferred alternative by the applicant.
Well stated.
Thank you. Yeah, very well stated.
I'm just going to jump in.
Yeah.
And I have no dog in this fight because the issues are predominantly, visual and other things. But bear in mind, and we've had this discussion before, when you start to better one negative impact, you may end up worsening others. And as a consequence, just because it gets proposed as an alternative doesn't mean it's better. And there may be related issues. So, and again, what we're not asking them to do is develop a bunch of site plans. I think what we're asking them to do is take a look at the elements of what that would constitute and basically paint a verbal picture of what that may be and balance the visual against the other impacts. Because, when you start to, for instance, cluster houses, you are seeing it on some of the other projects you have. The minute you start to cluster things, you start to then need central sewer, you start to need central water, you start to need other parameters that may not fit with the goals of the project sponsor. But at least you looked at it. And I think that's what you have to, I think that's Paul's and George's goal here, is to at least, is there a way you can avoid the visual impacts, but that doesn't mean that you don't create others that you then have to deal with.
The main thing here and the driving force is that the significant adverse impact that the board has identified is the visual impacts. And I think you need to have an apples to apples comparison beyond a narrative.
Right.
You need to have a visual manifestation of it that this board can look at, that the public can see, and then the applicant around that can explain the sort of things that you're talking about, John. But I think that's, essentially what you need in order to have a fair alternatives analysis of the potential impacts of the preferred action as compared to something that might be visually less impactful and potentially could still achieve the applicant's objectives. That would be the ideal, if there was a way that could occur. And I'm not sure that homework has been done. But that's what the alternatives analysis would do. And it just struck us as we looked at the alternatives that what's presented is you have your preferred action. We're doing a lot of visual impact homework around that. And back in the conservation analysis, a lot had been done to show how bad it could be. That's all we have in terms of the alternatives that were presented. And so the hope was to look for something that would do more to avoid the visual impacts and perhaps also achieve the applicant's objectives. That would be the ideal.
So if I may, I'd like to, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I'd like to turn it over just briefly to Peter Farrow, just to address that, because they're going to be the ones putting together the EIS, and he can address the options for the alternatives. But I would like to just state for the record, as you all know, that the proposal is for 23 farms, residential farms. It's more than 23 lots. But, so and when you talk about density, it's not just about the number of units. We're talking about the style of development that we're looking for here, which is large farms. Okay, so I just wanted to just state that for the record. I said that's what is the objective that's the applicant's objective.
And that objective, one of the questions might be, okay, could you have a really big farm that's shared in a different way than broken up into 23 different parcels of 600 acres? Maybe have, large lots and then a 400-acre farm.
Okay, go ahead.
That's shared in different ways. I don't know.
I'd like to make one suggestion, and I'm going to abstain when we ultimately vote, so I don't know if that's
Yeah.
relevant. But I think the worst-case visual impact for the public is not going to be that helpful, and that I think you should only present things that the current draft secret would comply with, because the high-density alternative would be a whole different application, where a lot of the things would be of impact. And so I feel like that it risks complicating something that doesn't need to be complicated. We should be looking at, as you're saying, alternatives that, in the public, that which do you like better, but it all conforms with what we've kind of, has been drafted and proposed, so as not to muddy the waters for people, including the board.
Sorry, I didn't know if there was more. I didn't want to interrupt. Okay. No, I appreciate that. Peter Farrow with AKRF. I think the language that Paul and George came up with for additional alternatives, we don't have any objection to that. I think it makes sense. We'll put all of this in the EIS. The only other things I would mention, as Diana mentioned, is one, kind of what the purpose of the application is. Two, that it is zoning compliant. And so I appreciate your comments with regard to whether it muddies the waters or not. And I understand that one of the things Seeker does say, and it does say in the Seeker handbook, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but looking at alternatives that are permitted within the zoning is instructive in an EIS, and that's one of the reasons. And then the third thing I would say is, I haven't been at this as long as everyone else here has, so I appreciate that. But this application also didn't start at this point, right? It started at a different point. It has evolved. It has evolved in terms of its design, in terms of its layout, in terms of the declaration and the easements and the measures that were put in, offered to be put into place with regards to house size and color and location and lot. So I think it's important, and we'll get into this in the EIS. The EIS asks for this information, right? To note that this wasn't just the starting point. There was actually a lot of work that went in between the board and the applicant in terms of trying to minimize those impacts, whether they did or didn't, right? There was some movement, and I think that's just an important thing. But we'll get into that in the EIS. I think, as Paul and John and George said, moving the process forward and getting the alternatives that are helpful in the EIS, in the document, and out to the public is important.
So this, and that's great, that's wonderful. I think, so how this would play out is essentially you all would present something, and George, as he has been, would provide some advice to the boards, and the board would go like, this at some point and say, include that in the scope of your DEIS.
Well, so that I'm not so sure about. I would sign on to as the method that we would use, but happy to talk about it. The Seeker regulations prescribe a process for how an EIS is undertaken. The lead agency adopts the scope. It defines the alternatives that should be studied. The applicant prepares those alternatives, prepares that EIS, presents it to the board for completeness. Now, I think it would be very helpful to be able to coordinate with George and Paul, and, you know, obviously it comes back to you for completeness anyway. So it would be silly to say, for the applicant to say, you know, we don't want to talk until we send the final document in, right? The goal is to get to a complete document. That's our goal. That's your goal. On the other hand, we have to balance the need to get the document done. And what we don't want to have happen is be in a situation where we go back and forth kind of without an end date of trying to develop this site plan or that site plan or a third site plan or a fourth iteration of site plan or a sixth iteration of a site plan. That's not the way an EIS is supposed to work, right? We've been through the process of revising this project quite a bit. The EIS is supposed to come up with alternatives that demonstrate how impacts could be minimized. It's not the purpose to participate in kind of a collaborative design process. I mean, that's not it. So something in between the two, I think, is where we need to end up. We certainly don't want to say, we don't want to talk, because that's silly. That doesn't help anybody. We've worked with George before, I've worked with George before. That's perfectly fine, and we should do that. We should collaborate. But there also has to be a process.
Right, understood, and, you know, we really saw this as more of an offer to the applicant to have that process, so you don't get too far ahead, because the risk is, if the applicant goes and decides what it's gonna do, it's your EIS at the end of the day. And so you have to be comfortable with the alternatives that the applicant pursues. And so trying to refine that, you know, before you actually started putting pen to paper and developing visual simulations and spending a bunch of money, you know, we thought that would be helpful to you all.
I think it would be.
Yeah, so, but, you know, and this goes, we've had the conversation about the DEIS process, and I know what the regulations say, but I also know that working within that, there's ways that we can help to save the applicant money, we can help to make sure that the board's thinking is reflected in the alternatives that are actually ultimately chosen to be studied. And so that's kind of what we're looking for.
So I agree with that, and look, the last thing I want to do, I mean, I get paid by the hour, so, you know, I'm happy to keep doing this. I'm sure my client's not, but I am. So, no, but to your point, I want to get to the end of this process too. And so, as long as we can balance the need to kind of move the process forward, because quite frankly, what we can't do is have another, you know, year of going back and forth on what the alternatives are. The alternatives are written in the scope. The scope has to be adopted within 60 days, right? We all know this. You're going to list what the alternatives have to be. How we present those alternatives, ultimately, it's in our best interest to be on the same page with the board because it's your determination as to completeness. But we can't do it where we're coming, you know, presenting something to George, coming to a meeting 3 months later, moving this house, changing this color. We can't do that. So we got to find something in between. That's all I'm saying.
And really, when it comes down to it, you have 60 days according to the seeker regulations to adopt the final scope. You know, we're probably not looking at doing that at the October 22nd meeting, because you're just going to be hearing from the public at that point. But if the goal is that by, what would it be, November 12th, by the November 12th meeting, this will have been nailed down, I think that's something probably that you guys could live with, right? The alternatives, because as part of the final scope, knowing what these final alternatives are going to be.
Do you envision something in the scope that would be different than the language that you included in your memo?
Just more comfort on both sides as to what that means, you know, beyond.
I would love to. I don't know if we'll be able to kind of design, lay out two different alternatives within
I just-
40 days.
I'm just mindful of what the applicant has been through in terms of getting through the conservation analysis and not wanting to have that happen again, but at the same time wanting to make sure the board gets something that's a meaningful comparison.
Well, and that's our goal too. I mean, we want you to have a meaningful comparison because that only helps the decision-making process and it only helps the record. That being said, I don't think we will be in a position to have drawn out and laid out those alternatives by then. I just think realistically, I mean, we're looking at a month from now. I don't see how we do that in 2 weeks, get it to you guys. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see how that happens. I think describing the alternatives and the purpose of the alternatives and the characteristics that should be included and the considerations and criteria against which you can then make your completeness determination. Did the EIS meet the criteria that was set out in the scope? And then I think having that discussion before and during that process of, are we on the right track? Are we not on the right track? That is something I think we definitely should do, 100%.
Can we ask George if
Sure.
you have any thoughts? Because I'm out of my depth.
Well, okay, so I think the way Peter described it is acceptable, right? The way that Paul described it, I think is ideal, right? Is that, so then you lock it down ahead of time, and then you finalize the scope, and everybody knows what's exactly in it. But that can take some time, and an EIS is a big process and a big thing, and these are, two little parts of it. And you don't necessarily want to hold up the process on the entire EIS to finalize these two elements. And so if you describe these two elements in words and with the understanding that there's going to be a determination of what they are, and they're not just going to be like, oh, here's our EIS, and this is what we came up with at the end. I think that's acceptable. Again, it's not ideal, but I think it's also fairly typical, right? It's not atypical.
That actually sounds very much like the conversation that George and I had the other day, when it came back with some more ideas. So I have no problem with that as long as the board's comfortable with it. And as long as you end up with an alternative that provides a meaningful comparison and hopefully provides for less visual impacts.
So just in light of just the past discussions and dealings, I think that if we could have authority to have these conversations with George separately, and then, if there is, one or two members of the board that like to participate, but I think what Peter was saying is just avoiding coming back to a full board meeting every time to get input. So I think with that in mind, that would be acceptable then.
Yeah. And I probably shouldn't say, but I would even say, knowing that George doesn't speak for the board. Like, I know that. And so I don't have that concern, right? George does very well, but I also know that what George says isn't what you say, and that's okay, right? Like, for me, like, I know that, so.
Okay, you got any questions on the board?
Not right now.
Right now, okay.
Come back and say.
We'll have to look and see.
Question I have for Roseanne is, we're gonna need the auditorium for a public hearing coming up. Or can you coordinate this with Judy so we have it for her next meeting? Because obviously there's gonna be a lot of people in this room who's not gonna handle it. I can tell you that for a fact.
I've been talking to Leo about it, and he knows about it. We've talked about a sound system, et cetera, where we're gonna set up things, but if you wanna be involved, that's fine too.
She's a liaison for us, so that's why I'm speaking to her now.
And the applicant will be providing a stenographer.
Yes, a court reporter to take down, right? Yes,
So can you make arrangements so we can get the auditorium?
Probably up north.
Okay, thank you so much, 'cause I think it's rather important.
yeah.
I've been down this road before, so Nina has too.
Can I just remind you, you still need to grant authorization for Paul and George to deal with the applicant. I didn't want that to fall off the table, sir.
No, it hasn't yet. Any other discussion? So we need to authorize that our attorney and George James can correspond with each other.
Yeah.
With the applicant,
What I was thinking, you know, obviously this is a subject of great public interest. And what I hear you saying is, look, there's got to be a point at which we sort of say, this is our, for lack of a better word, best and final visual presentation, because we got to move forward and you can't just iterate forever, which makes a ton of sense. I guess, and again, it's awkward because I know I'm abstaining, but I feel like obviously the more that the designers can stretch to find that next creative idea that, you know, isn't really, sometimes, not in this case, and I think there's been a lot of work to lessen the visual impact, and we're in a whole different place than where this started, to my observation. But sometimes you see these, especially where the public feels like, well, they've given me really two non-alternatives, right? And it creates a lot of contention, an awkward situation for a planning board in this town and others. And the more it can be like, what is the next really creative thing that I can do to lessen visual impact, I think the better situation it is for everyone.
But I think that it's not a bad idea to have it in writing that we looked at these two other options too, but they don't do what you're looking for, you know? So, yes, that's all. They don't have to do a whole series of photographs and everything for these two others. They can just put it in writing because they're pretty clear.
For the,
We need a visual.
For the
you need the visual for the ones that would show a reduced impact. 'Cause that's the only way you're gonna
That's the only way we're ever gonna know.
Sorry, yes.
So right now, we need a motion.
Anyway, I move that we as a board authorize Paul and George and who else to work with the applicant and their people together to get this moving. Is that okay?
We need a second.
Come on, James.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
But I am abstaining.
You're abstaining, yes, we know that. That's why I pointed
So,
it out.
sorry, since we're
Oh, we can
here,
do that.
yeah, they can't, that's only three, that's only three. I don't, does he have to abstain from?
Wait,
from
time
this?
out.
Yeah, okay, all
You
right.
don't have a quorum.
We don't have a quorum.
Can't vote.
That's it.
Can't vote.
Yeah. Do you have concurrence among the board members?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you guys.
It's not a formal,
Yes.
it's not a formal vote, it's a vote of, it's a demonstration of intent and concurrence. So as a consequence, the fact that you don't have a quorum doesn't render this any less successful in this
Correct.
circumstance.
I wasn't gonna bring it up, I just, you know,
Anyway,
Jamie's in his situation and totally respecting that. But I think having three members of the board saying,
long as you're saying it's okay, you're our attorney.
nobody's going to jail over that.
This is not a formal action,
Yeah.
this is merely an authorization.
Correct.
Right. So it's a second, it's a second level.
Okay.
Just since we're here for clarity, would the board like for us to prepare a presentation for October 22nd for the public prior
That'd be a
to?
great idea.
Okay, all right.
Screen for that?
Well, if there is nothing, if the auditorium is not fitted with that, then we can prepare, yeah, we
We're gonna
can,
have to talk to you guys
Let's
about how we do this.
We'll get a better projector than with Troutbeck.
Yeah.
We've
No,
got,
not good.
Judy, we've got all the things,
Good.
depending on how big the room is.
Well, we can go there.
But we'll go look right now.
Well, look, when we get done, I'll go with you.
Well, perfect, thank you.
okay.
Is that being said, do you have anything
Yes,
else?
thank you. No,
Anyone else, any discussion other on the board here? Is there any other discussion? Only thing I remind everyone out in the public is don't forget to change your batteries and your smoke detectors, very important.
I just had a question for Rosanna. I didn't get to see everything yet. Did you guys finish with the new, I'm sorry, resolution for the ZBA and for us? Is that all done? Or the new rules?
No.
No, not yet? Okay.
Good.
Just
So,
wondering.
so it's in Ian's hands right now, and he is based on comments that were made by both you guys and by, everybody else in the world, and our comments, and he's going to draft something.
Thank you. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to.
With that being said, I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye, aye.
All right,